Well, this might be an interesting exercise. Some of you are aware that I have written a book. It's called Abercrombie and the Dragon, and I wrote it just to see if I could write an adventure novel. So I created a manuscript. Manuscripts don't do you much good if they're never published, so then I tried to figure out how to publish one. Well, people like Simon and Schuster don't talk to individuals unless they have an agent, okay? And I decided not to do that, so I studied on self-publishing, and I published the book myself. And it's now out there available on Amazon and Kindle and Barnes & Noble, Books A Million and the like. But I've made all of $18.64 in royalties from it because I don't really want to go around doing book signings all over the country and promoting this book. I'd rather play music, okay? So at any rate, my book is sitting out there, and I'm thinking, why don't I just turn it into bedtime stories for my friends? Okay, so stand by. If you're interested in hearing my book, what's in it, I will just read it to you chapter by chapter. Chapter 1, Throw Cans Return. There it is again, Abercrombie thought, keeping his eyes closed just in case he was being watched. The strange sound that initially woke him had just become evident again. The rooster had not yet crowed. The sun hadn't risen high enough above the eastern hills to light his room. He knew it wasn't time yet to get up. Nights were normally quiet around his woodland cabin, so to be awakened in this manner was extremely unusual. That explained the apprehension Abercrombie felt. Oh no, he would have never admitted it was fear, but it was something approaching fear, to be sure. He became aware of another sound. Now it was more constant and not nearly as loud. It was more like the crackling of a blazing fire in a fireplace. He had not moved or even opened his eyes. A glow of light permeated his still closed eyelids. He reasoned that if someone had entered his room with a lantern, he was not alone. He lay still in his bed, holding his breath and listening intently. Now he could hear nothing but the crackling sound. Then it hit him. Of course, his older sister Alicia was at it again. She loved doing things just to aggravate him, and this time she was doing a great job of it. He opened his eyes just a tiny bit, so she would not become aware that he was awake. When he saw the light he detected was streaming into his bedroom through the window, and not from a lantern, he was puzzled. How would Alicia accomplish that? He rolled over suddenly and quickly scanned the room, but Alicia was nowhere to be seen. Sliding out from under his covers and sitting up on the edge of the bed, it appeared that nothing in his room was misplaced or out of the ordinary. Well, except for the flickering light coming in through the window that cast moving shadows on the walls. The motion of those shadows made the furniture appear to move slightly to and fro, almost as if it were doing some kind of an eerie dance. How is she doing that? He thought. He cautiously rose to his feet and stepped slowly to the wall beside his window. If Alicia was watching from outside, he wanted to make sure she wouldn't be able to spot his movements. Ever so slowly, he approached the window and peeked around its frame with one eye. What he saw was an astonishing sight. The entire village below his hillside cabin was aflame. Not just a house or two, no, not just the marketplace or the trade buildings, but the entire village of Iridor. All suspicion that this was another of Alicia's pranks vanished. The blazing fire explained the crackling sound he'd heard, as well as the bright flickering light that illuminated his room and the surrounding countryside. Flames raged through the village, almost like an animal eating its prey. Through those flames he could see the road that led out of the village and through the valley beyond. The road was filled with a steady stream of panic-stricken villagers running for their very lives. For a fleeting moment, a wave of terror gripped his heart, not knowing whether his father had made it to safety, but the sight of a familiar plaid shirt among the fleeing villagers helped allay those fears. His father was frantically urging people to hurry along the road, helping them all to escape from the blazing village. Abercrombie was sure his father was leading them all eastward to the safety of the caverns of Macadia. Then he heard it again, that whooshing sound that had first awakened him. It was soft as a whisper at first. It kept growing louder and louder, as if something ominous and fearful was approaching. Thunder in the background, that helps. He backed away from the window Suddenly, the light from the fire of the village went completely dark. The whooshing sound became a roar. The window curtains flapped in the breeze, and he could feel the sound deep in his chest. He grabbed the edge of the dresser to stabilize himself as the cabin itself shook. Just as suddenly the light returned, and the whooshing sound diminished. Abercrombie caught his breath and stepped to the window. He then realized he'd just witnessed the cause of all the commotion and calamity. Alicia was not responsible for this. A huge dragon had just flown past, between his window and the village below. The dragon's huge body had momentarily blocked out all of the light and heat from the raging fire below as it flew past. Abercrombie stood and watched the scene before him in astonishment. He'd heard tales of dragons before, but always thought they were just figments of his grandfather's imagination. His mom had always told Abercrombie to take Grandpa's stories with a grain of salt, which was her way of saying they might not all be true. But there it was, an honest-to-goodness, flying, roaring, fire-breathing dragon. In an odd way, the dragon was a thing of beauty. It had a long, slender neck, body, and tail resembling those of a dinosaur. No, not like the Tyrannosaurus rex that stood upright and walked on its two rear legs. This dragon's shape was more like that of a brontosaurus, one of those dinosaurs that walked on all fours, except the dragon's body was much longer, leaner, and sleeker, much more aerodynamic. He was covered head to toe with iridescent scales which reflected a myriad of colors when the light from the fire below fell upon them. It was like watching a radiant flying rainbow. The flashing, changing colors were so beautiful, they were almost mesmerizing. The dragon's head was very unique, with bony ridges to give the impression he had ears laid back along his skull. Other ridges gave the impression he had eyebrows, which formed a perpetual malevolent scowl. It was definitely a head that belonged on a fiendish and diabolical monster. And his wings, surprising, they were much more delicate looking than one might expect would be required to lift a creature of his size. The front edges of the wings appeared to be made of strong bone, but the remainder was of a leathery looking material so gossamer thin that the light from the fire could actually be seen through them. The tip of his tail ended in what might be described as a spear tip shape, or something resembling a large arrowhead. All 4 feet were fitted with talons long and razor sharp. They resembled those of an eagle, only much longer and larger. Abercrombie couldn't imagine a creature big enough or strong enough to withstand an attack from those terrible talons. Strangely, the most fearsome thing about the dragon was his nostrils, which flared menacingly. He had the ability to expel huge fireballs from them at will, to instantly incinerate anything they contacted. Abercrombie was frozen in place, spellbound as the dragon flew over Iridor again, breathing another fireball of flame into it. It was as if that dragon wanted to make sure that not so much as a single structure in the village would survive. With that realization, Abercrombie suddenly thought, the dragon is ignoring the villagers. It's not intent on killing people, only on destroying all the buildings. I am in our cabin, which is a building. I'm in danger. I could be killed. He quickly stepped into his trousers, grabbed his shirt and boots, and ran downstairs, calling out for his mother and sister. They were crouched together in the corner of the parlor, obviously terrified. Come quickly, Abercrombie shouted. We've got to get out of this cabin right now before the dragon returns. The 2 women only huddled tighter, frozen with fear. They stared wide-eyed at him, sobbing in absolute terror. Abercrombie grabbed his sister's hand and yelled forcefully, "Come on, we've got to go now." Although Alicia was usually completely unwilling to take orders from her younger brother, he spoke with such authority that she jumped up and pulled her mother to her feet. They all bolted out of the cabin and toward the woods behind the cabin, just as fast as their feet could carry them. Just as they stepped under the sheltering canopy of the trees, the faint whooshing sound could be heard again, growing stronger and stronger. The dragon suddenly reappeared just over the roof of the cabin, and with a mighty roar blasted a fireball that consumed the entire structure. Even though they'd escaped to a sheltered place a safe distance away, They could still feel the heat from the dragon's searing breath. What happened there? I don't know. What had been their comfortable hillside home only moments before had been turned into yet another blazing inferno. The cabin would easily have become their funeral pyre had it not been for the fast action and resourcefulness of Abercrombie, the youngest of the three. At the sight of her home and all of their earthly belongings going up in flame, his mother began sobbing uncontrollably. When Abercrombie saw the depth of her emotion and heartbreak, all of his childish rebellion toward her dissipated. His sister simply stood next to their mother and stared at him helplessly, as if to ask what to do. Although there had always been a strong sibling rivalry between them, his heart softened toward her also. He went to them and held them both in his arms to comfort them, while their tears flowed freely. He struggled to keep from breaking down and sobbing with them. It was at that moment Abercrombie realized it would be up to him to see that they survived. He would have to summon all of his strength and courage to lead them safely through the perilous land that lay between them and the caverns of Macadia. Donning his shirt and boots, he said, "We can't simply pass through the village to join the others. We'll have to travel around it, through the forests and hills. We'll need to stay beneath the forest canopy to avoid the dragon's view until we can reach the mountain path that leads to the caverns of Macadia to the east. There we'll find Father, and he'll know what to do." That was the moment Abercrombie went from a mischievous and carefree 15-year-old boy to a courageous and determined young man who was about to embark on the quest of a lifetime. Thus begins the story of their incredible journey and adventure, the story of Abercrombie and the dragon. End of chapter 1. So join me next time for chapter 2. Thanks.